So finally, now the baby's been born, and we get to what happens in the immediate aftermath. Now, one of the big things we need to talk about is fetal circulation. We've talked about this a little bit in the circulatory system, but when the fetus is still in the uterus, there is very little blood flowing to the lungs. So instead, you have circulation through the umbilical cord to the placenta, where gas exchange and nutrient exchange happens. And then that circulation comes back and goes into the inferior vena cava, comes back into the heart. So the blood coming into the heart is now a mix of the oxygen-rich blood from the placenta and the oxygen-poor blood from the rest of the body. But the lungs aren't going to help. So a little bit of blood is going to go to the lungs because the lungs need blood like all the rest of the body does to develop. But most of that blood is just going to go directly from the right side of the heart into the left side of the heart through the ductus arteriosus and the foramen ovale. Now, when the baby is born, maybe takes their first breath and their lungs expand. Oops, sorry. One more important thing before I get to that particular piece. So we have the umbilical cord here. So the umbilical cord is that connection to the placenta. Now, when a baby is born, actually about 10% of the baby's blood is in that umbilical cord. We used to actually cut the umbilical cord very soon after birth, but it was realized that depriving the baby of all of that blood can lead to other issues with anemia and low blood pressure and problems for the baby. So instead, these days, unless there's a specific reason not to, we try to leave that cord attached under most circumstances for a while to let that blood empty back into the newborn baby, and then we can remove the cord afterwards. So, in addition to the difference with the umbilical cord, that big difference is what's going on in the heart. So we have the ductus arteriosus and the foramen ovale, and these let blood directly from the blood flowing in to go right out into the body. Now, obviously, we don't want that to happen when the blood needs to go to the lungs, so the ductus arteriosus constricts, allowing all the blood leaving the right ventricle to travel to the lungs, and the foramen ovale closes, preventing that flow right between the left and the right sides. And as long as this happens normally, this is all fine, these seal up. However, in some people, this can fail to happen, and this allows just a little bit of backflow, a little bit of mixed blood. And if there's major failures of this to close, that causes a lot of problems. It becomes obvious we need to fix it. However, if one of them, usually the foramen ovale, fails to close just a little bit, that can be minor, and it can just sort of make the heart work a little bit harder all the time for years. When you hear about like high school and college athletes dropping dead from a heart attack on the field, often they're dealing with some sort of heart defect, and this is a very common version where the foramen ovale fails to close, causing just that little bit of extra work, and as they're exerting themselves on the field, it results in a heart attack. It's a very easy surgery to fix. I mean, it's still heart surgery, but we can do it by threading a catheter into a vein going into the heart and just patching it up, basically. So this is very manageable as long as we know it's there. The problem is that it can often be silent and we can miss it. All right, so that's what's happening with the baby. The mother is also undergoing changes at this point where the mother is going to be producing milk. So in the later part of pregnancy, in the third trimester, the estrogen will start building up these mammary glands, and also prolactin will be produced, and this will signal the start of milk production. Now, so prolactin produces the milk then, when the baby sucks on the nipple, that produces oxytocin. It produces a direct suction, pulling milk out, and it also produces oxytocin, causing letdown, allowing that milk to flow out to the baby. So milk ducts, as we covered in the female reproductive system, are modified from sweat glands, the same sweat glands that are under your armpit. So primitive mammals just secreted milk like sweat, and we developed nipples to sort of make it easier for the babies to make sure they got all of it and not have it just lapping up on the body like that. Now, the other problem we have with very young infants is thermoregulation. Now, babies have a really hard time remaining warm because they have a high surface to volume ratio. So there's a lot of skin, a lot of surface area relative to the amount of volume for a small creature. And they also have an underdeveloped thermoregulatory system. They have limited muscle development, and so they need a lot of energy to remain warm. This is why, like premature babies especially, we tend to put in incubators or recommend kangaroo care, which is skin-to-skin contact. Now that does two things, that skin-to-skin contact. It helps the thermoregulation system, obviously, and this is often recommended for neonates, newborns, even without prematurity. It helps them thermoregulate. It also helps them regulate their breathing. So one weird thing about humans is that we are all born premature if you compare us to other apes. We have these giant heads that don't fit through the birth canal, and so the only way we can manage that is by being born premature and basically doing a lot more development outside. So we have this problem of needing to maintain thermoregulation. Now, a lot of this is just done by, in most environments, babies for the first 3 months to a year are carried very physically close to the parent almost all the time. But they need some way to deal with the cold, at least a little bit, when they're separated from the parent. And that is brown fat in particular. So brown fat is fat cells that are full of mitochondria. And these mitochondria, rather than using that, creating energy and using it to do something, just create energy and to make heat. So they just create energy, make heat, produce heat, and build this up. Now, everyone has some brown fat. There's a little bit left in adults, sort of between the shoulder blades and a few other places, but babies have a lot of it. So they are able to maintain their temperature somewhat by just burning through energy in this way. It's not, it costs a lot of energy, and so they can't maintain this for very long, but it allows some maintenance of temperature. So that's the end of the fertilization and pregnancy talk. And I want to remind you that there is a review that this final that is opening up includes all of the system-wide interconnections. So this is a chance to put all of these pieces together. I highly, highly recommend doing this with your group mates. And this is going to be turned in, but it's also a chance for you to really get ready for this final.